Good segue over to our next speaker, who is Ian Corby. Ian is the Executive Director of Age Verification Providers Association, the global trade body for suppliers of age estimation and age verification technologies. He is also the Secretary General of EU Consent, a nonprofit which is continuing the work that was started by an EU-funded project to deliver an interoperable network for age assurance and parental consent. Ian, thank you for being here. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to, of course, thank the ambassador from the Philippines for the kind invitation to come here today, as well as the organisers. As Lisa said, I'm the Executive Director of a global trade association. We represent 30 suppliers of technology that helps you to prove your age, not your identity, your age online. So our mission is to make the internet age aware. We're politically neutral, so I'll leave the campaigning to other people on this panel, but I'm sure my members would share the goals of everybody at the meeting today to combat human trafficking and exploitation. If we can use technology to put a man on the moon, then it's perfectly possible to prove your age online without disclosing your identity. This is the thing that people are most worried about when we talk about age verification online. But seriously, it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. And it's only your age, because when you walk into a bar, the bartender doesn't need to know your name. He just needs to know that you're old enough to buy a drink. So we make it possible, essentially, to apply the same norms that we've had in the real world for 100 years. In fact, it was the first female MP in the UK who passed a law in 1923 requiring age verification for alcohol sales in the UK. So we're 100 years into this process. But these laws are being expanded everywhere. We're seeing it in Australia, where they're going to trial age verification. The European Digital Services Act requires it. They've already got a video sharing platforms directive which requires it. And in the UK, there's an Online Safety Act. And we've heard about many US states looking at this, and the Canadian government is debating it as well. So there are plenty of governments around the world who've realised it's possible to do this. And I just wanted to explain really how it's done. In the old days, you might remember people used to hold up their ID and smile and take a photo, and it was done that way. That's okay, but it's a little bit obviously open to abuse. You can now take a photo of your ID with your smartphone. We can compare that to a selfie and check that it belongs to you, obviously then reading the age. I mean, some of these cards now have chips in them, so you can be doubly sure that the information is accurate. And we also have ways of doing this using estimation. So we can just take a selfie, and using artificial intelligence, that's accurate to within an average error of about 1.5 years for the age groups that we're worried about. That technology works for voices as well. We can just take a voice sample. And even in the last month, I've found a company that does it based on hand movements, because apparently our hands move in a different way as we get older. You can just give us your email address. It turns out not many 5-year-olds are searching for a good mortgage rate using their email address. So if you use a number of data points where you've used your email address, you can demonstrate that you're likely to be an adult. So overall, I wanted to explain today that age verification is convenient, it's accurate, it's cheap, it's privacy preserving, it's secure, it's effective, accessible, inclusive, enforceable. There's a lot of things to go through there, so I perhaps won't try and get through them all in the time. But let me just pick up on a few of them. First of all, it's accurate. We have independent auditors who assess and certify against international standards written by organisations like the British Standards Institute, the IEEE here in the USA, and there's an international standard which is at a committee draft stage, so will hopefully next year become approved by governments around the world as the global standard. Cost shouldn't be a problem either. The UK government recently estimated in an impact assessment for some legislation, it costs about 12 cents a check. Now, most adult sites would just need to do a check once per year of a user to make sure that they're an adult. So that shouldn't be too expensive. In fact, the UK government also expects that to come down, because one thing we've worked on as an industry is reusability and interoperability. So if you do an age check for one site, you can reuse the same check across multiple other sites. And we're developing a system where we just drop an electronic token onto your device, which for a period of time will just facilitate your access to other sites. Every so often we have to check it's still you to make sure you haven't handed that device. You know, dad gets an upgrade from his cell phone manufacturer and gives his device to his kids. Obviously, we don't want that to be remaining as an adult device. But we can make it much more convenient from that perspective. It's also effective. You'll often hear, often the adult industry themselves will say, oh, but virtual private networks, this makes the whole thing a complete failure. What a VPN allows you to do is to pretend that you're not in New York as you are at present, but that you are in Bangladesh or in the Philippines. But I have not seen any legislation that says in, for example, New Jersey, you must not allow kids in New Jersey to access pornography, except if they've got a VPN, in which case it's absolutely fine. Right? The law says you mustn't let kids in New Jersey access that content. And so it's on the adult sites to make sure that you are not in New Jersey if they're going to let you in without checking your age. My view is, why not just check the age of everybody anyway to be safe? But if they're not going to do it, it's their duty to make sure that you're somewhere where that's not a legal requirement. It's accessible. Obviously, the interoperability helps with this, but you've just got to find one of those methods that works for you. It's inclusive. In the UK, we have a vouching process for people who are undocumented, so you can get your teacher or your doctor to go online and vouch for your age, because, of course, not everybody, particularly when we're dealing with refugees and asylum seekers, will have documentation if they can't pass one of those estimation tests. You may hear some people suggesting things like device-based measures or filtering. I mean, we've tried filtering for the last 20 years, and I'm afraid the level of exposure of pornography is as bad as it's ever been. What we suggest is that the people who need to take the lead responsibility for this are those who are publishing it. They are the closest to the material. They are the ones who can tell what is harmful and what is not. And they are the ones who should be responsible for protecting their users. That's a very quick canter through a lot of technology. I'd be very happy to answer any questions after the event today, but I hope that's useful and arms you just to go away with some confidence that this is actually pretty straightforward if we have the political will to do so. Thank you.